The rain came down in sheets, turning the dirt beneath her boots into a slick, clinging mess. From the ridge, Sergeant Alina Voss could see the faint orange glow of artillery in the valley below, each flash followed by the distant hollow thump of explosions. Her breathing was steady, measured, not because she was calm, but because she'd trained herself to be. She knew that any break in rhythm, even something as small as a shaky inhale, could throw off the shot. Alina adjusted the antique wooden sniper rifle resting on the bipod in front of her. The weapon didn't belong in this century. Its brass scope was scratched, the wood polished by decades of handling, but it had a story, one she didn't tell. Her unit called it a relic. The enemy would learn tonight that relics could still end wars. Through the narrow glass of the scope, she could make out the convoy crawling along the far side of the valley. A dozen vehicles, armored transports, fuel trucks, and in the center, a mobile artillery unit. They were on a collision course with friendly forces stationed 3 kilometers east. Command had ordered her to hold fire until the signal. But in her ear, the comms were nothing but static. No signal, no backup, just her. Her finger hovered above the trigger guard as she made a quick calculation. Wind speed, low. Distance, just over 2 miles. The target, moving, but predictable. She had one chance, and if she missed, the entire flank would be exposed. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the valley for a fraction of a second. In that brief moment, Alina saw movement along the ridge opposite her position. 3 figures, low and fast, carrying what looked like anti-air launchers. If they made it to position, they'd take out the friendly choppers inbound for support. Her mind worked in layers. Primary objective, secondary threats, survival odds. She could eliminate the artillery and end the convoy's advance, or she could take out the launcher team before they crippled air support. There was no time to relay for orders. The decision was hers. The brass scope fogged slightly with her breath as she adjusted her aim, swinging from the convoy to the shadowy figures on the ridge. One step at a time, they moved closer to their firing line. She knew the exact moment she had to act, when they stopped to set up the launchers. It was seconds away. A sharp crack of gunfire rang out somewhere to her right, and a puff of dirt kicked up just inches from her position. They'd spotted her. The next shot wouldn't miss. Her heartbeat stayed steady. She eased her breath, adjusted for the crosswind, and placed the first shadow squarely in her crosshairs. Time slowed. The rain, the distant roar of engines, the hiss of her own breath, all of it faded into the background. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked back, the shot echoing through the valley. In the scope, she saw the first target crumple, before the others even realized what had happened. A second shot, clean, efficient, dropped the second figure. The third bolted, but didn't make it far. Alina rolled sideways, just as another round tore through where her head had been. Mud splattered her face as she slid behind a jagged boulder for cover. She chambered the next round, but the convoy was already reacting. Vehicles began to scatter, lights cutting through the rain like search beams. Her earpiece crackled to life. "Voss, status?" She pressed the mic. "Launcher team neutralized. Convoys breaking formation. Need orders." Static again. No response. Alina wiped the water from her eyes, glanced once more at the convoy, and saw the artillery unit making a break for it. This was the moment. No one was going to give her the green light. No one was going to stop her either. She slid back into position, settled behind the rifle, and exhaled slowly. The shot she was about to take was more than just a mission objective. It was the kind of shot that ended careers or made legends. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The shot echoed through the valley like a crack of thunder, but there was no time to admire the hit. Alina shifted instantly, reacquiring the artillery unit through the fogged brass scope. The convoy was in chaos now, trucks swerving off the muddy track, soldiers spilling from side doors scanning the ridges for her position. That was good. Distracted enemies made mistakes. Her breath fogged the inside of her mask. She pulled it down, ignoring the cold rain slapping against her skin. She needed perfect clarity for the shot she was about to take. The artillery vehicle was gaining distance fast, its massive wheels spraying mud as it veered toward the cover of a stone outcrop. If it disappeared behind that, the friendly units advancing from the east would walk right into its line of fire. A flash of movement caught her eye. 2 hostiles breaking away from the convoy, sprinting uphill toward her position. They were trained. She could see it in the way they moved, staying low, using the terrain. In under a minute, they'd have her flank. She made a quick decision. The artillery could wait a few seconds. If she didn't clear her immediate threats, there would be no second shot. She pivoted the rifle, sighting on the first runner. His head popped above a boulder for only a fraction of a second, but that was enough. She squeezed the trigger. The round struck with surgical precision, and his body dropped like a stone. The second hostile didn't stop. He accelerated, sliding into a prone position and returning fire. Bullets chewed the mud around her, one round grazing the edge of her rifle stock. Alina ducked back behind cover, cycling the bolt. She could feel the vibration of the artillery's massive engine even from here. Every second she delayed meant another meter closer to losing the shot. She peeked, found the second hostile's muzzle flash, and fired. Silence followed. She swung the rifle back toward the convoy. The artillery vehicle was almost gone from sight now, just the rear wheels and the massive gun barrel visible as it rounded the stone cover. She had seconds. She dialed the scope, adjusting for the extreme range, factoring in the wind and the rain's subtle downward pull on the bullet. Her world narrowed to a single circle of glass, one breath, and a trigger press. The first shot went wide, not by much, but enough that the round sparked against the rock face just behind the artillery. The driver swerved sharply, and for a split second, the vehicle's side profile was exposed. That was all she needed. She chambered the next round, ignoring the ache in her shoulder from the rifle's recoil. The brass scope glinted as lightning tore across the sky again, casting the valley in ghostly light. She aimed for the engine compartment, knowing that a hit there wouldn't just stop the vehicle. It would turn it into an immovable wreck. Her finger tightened. The rifle roared. Through the scope, she saw the round punch through the side panel, followed by a bloom of black smoke. The artillery jolted violently, then listed to one side, its massive gun sagging like a fallen tree. Soldiers scrambled out, some dragging the injured, others firing blindly into the ridges. She knew better than to stay in one place now. Counter-sniper fire was inevitable. Alina slid down the ridge on her side, mud soaking her fatigues, and landed hard behind a larger rock formation. She checked her ammo, 4 rounds left. That wasn't much, but she didn't need much. Her earpiece crackled again, this time with more than static. "Voss, this is command. We see the artillery down. Hold your position. Air support is inbound." She pressed the mic, keeping her eyes on the slope below. "Negative. Hostiles are still advancing on my position. I'm moving to secondary vantage point." "Voss, that's not—" The voice cut off under the roar of nearby gunfire. She crawled toward a narrow crevice between 2 slabs of stone, her boots sliding on the slick surface. As she reached the gap, a shadow loomed above her, tall, armored, and holding an assault rifle leveled at her chest. His visor reflected the lightning, making his face unreadable. Alina froze, her hand still on the rifle. For a moment, neither moved. Then, from somewhere behind him, a single, sharp shot rang out, and the soldier collapsed at her feet. She glanced past the falling body and saw a figure standing in the rain, dark coat, hood up, rifle smoking. She didn't recognize him. He didn't say a word. He just turned and walked into the storm. The rain intensified, turning the ridgeline into a sheet of slick stone and mud. Alina stayed crouched over the fallen soldier for only a second, her eyes locked on the retreating figure. Whoever he was, he moved with a deliberate calm, as if the chaos around them didn't exist. That alone told her he wasn't a civilian. She slung her rifle, drawing the sidearm from her thigh holster. The ridge ahead offered no cover for 100 meters, just jagged rock teeth protruding from the slope. The figure was already halfway down, moving toward a cluster of abandoned supply crates near the edge of the valley. Her earpiece hissed again. "Voss, Commandant! We've got your position. 2 squads inbound for extraction. Hold tight." She didn't answer. This wasn't about extraction anymore. Whoever that man was, he had just saved her life with a single shot under impossible conditions. That meant he was either an ally she didn't know she had, or a threat who wasn't ready to kill her yet. She started moving, keeping low. The mud pulled at her boots with every step, the wind whipping strands of wet hair into her face. Twice she nearly slipped, the incline steep enough to send her tumbling into the chaos below. But she kept her eyes on the hooded figure. Then he stopped. The man knelt beside one of the supply crates, prying it open with a combat knife. Even from this distance, she could see his movements were precise, economical, military. A faint glow spilled from the crate as the lid came free. That glow wasn't natural. Alina's instinct screamed at her to halt. She found a notch in the rock and steadied her pistol on it, sights fixed on his center mass. The man reached inside the crate, pulled out something wrapped in a black polymer casing, and slung it over his shoulder in one smooth motion. Then he turned, directly toward her. Lightning flashed, and for an instant she saw his face. Not fully, just enough to register sharp features, a faint scar along his jawline, and eyes that were far too calm for this battlefield. He didn't raise his weapon. Instead, he lifted his free hand in a gesture that could have been a wave or a warning. Before she could react, he moved again, vanishing between 2 massive stone pillars near the valley's edge. She cursed under her breath and pushed forward, closing the distance. As she reached the crate, she saw what was inside. Several more polymer-wrapped packages, identical to the one he had taken. The glow came from a small embedded device, its faint blue light pulsing steadily. She'd never seen tech like this before. It wasn't standard issue, not for their side, and certainly not for the enemy. Her comms crackled again, this time more urgently. "Voss, get the hell out of there. Air support is 3 minutes out. Hostile armor moving into the valley." She ignored the order and inspected the crate more closely. There were markings along the inner lid, letters she didn't recognize, etched deep into the metal. Whatever this was, it wasn't meant for open warfare. A sudden burst of gunfire ripped across the slope above her, forcing her to dive behind the crate. Bullets shattered rock, spraying her with fragments. She rolled, drawing her rifle again, and spotted 3 enemy soldiers making their way down toward her position. The man in the hood was nowhere to be seen. Her choices narrowed instantly. She could stay here and try to hold until extraction, or she could follow him into the unknown and risk losing her only lead on whatever this weapon or device was. She made her decision. A single, precise shot dropped the lead soldier. She moved before the other 2 could react, sprinting toward the gap between the stone pillars where the hooded man had disappeared. The terrain funneled into a narrow pass, rainwater rushing down its center like a miniature river. She slipped twice, catching herself on jagged rock. Behind her, the enemy shouted, their voices muffled by the storm. Ahead, faint boot prints marked the mud, fresh, deep. She was close. The pass opened suddenly into a hollowed-out section of the ridge, shielded from view on three sides. And there he was, standing beside a camouflaged dirt bike, the polymer case strapped to its frame. He met her gaze, rain dripping from the edge of his hood. For a moment, neither moved. Then he spoke, his voice low, but cutting through the storm. "You're not supposed to be here." Alina tightened her grip on the rifle. "Neither are you." He gave a faint, humorless smile, then kicked the bike to life. The engine growled, tires spraying mud as he accelerated toward a barely visible trail leading down into the valley. She raised her rifle, but something in her gut stopped her finger from pulling the trigger. Instead, she watched him vanish into the rain, the sound of the engine fading into the distance. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this wasn't the last time she'd see him. The thunder rolled across the mountains like the growl of some unseen beast, masking the distant whine of incoming rotors. Alina pressed herself against the ridge wall, her pulse hammering in her ears. The dirt bike's tracks carved a clear trail into the valley below, vanishing into a labyrinth of stone and mud. She glanced upward. Two black specks cut across the storm-heavy sky. Helicopters, their searchlights slicing jagged paths through the rain. Friendly air support. But at this distance, with the hooded man already disappearing into the maze, air cover wouldn't be enough. Her earpiece came alive again, the urgency unmistakable. "Voss, this is command. Hostile armor has entered the southern pass. We're pulling you out now. Do you copy?" She didn't reply. Instead, she pulled the charging handle on her rifle, chambering a fresh round, and began her descent. Every step was a calculated gamble. The rain had turned the slope into a slick death trap, and somewhere below, that man carried a device she couldn't identify, one that glowed like it held the heartbeat of something alive. Gunfire erupted from the left flank. 3 enemy soldiers appeared at the crest of a nearby ridge, their muzzle flashes momentarily blinding against the gloom. She dropped to one knee, returned fire, and watched as one figure crumpled into the mud. The others fell back, shouting into radios. They weren't trying to kill her outright. They were trying to box her in. She pushed harder, her boots slamming into the wet earth. The dirt bike's engine still echoed faintly through the pass, a ghostly guide in the storm. Then she saw it. A sudden flare of light far ahead, bouncing off the valley walls. Not lightning, headlights. She moved toward it, sliding behind a tall boulder for cover. From there, she spotted the hooded man dismounting the bike, the polymer case still strapped to its side. He wasn't alone. Another figure, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a full-face rebreather mask, stepped out from the shadows to meet him. They exchanged no words, only a short nod. The masked man took the case, slinging it across his back with a fluidity that spoke of training. Then, as if on cue, a deep metallic rumble filled the air. Alina risked a glance over the rock. An armored vehicle, low profile, matte black, no identifiable insignia, rolled into view. Its wheels churned through the mud with ease, headlights cutting sharp beams through the rain. Her instincts screamed to pull back. Whatever operation this was, she was outnumbered, outgunned, and completely in the dark. But retreat wasn't in her nature. She raised her rifle, sighted in on the masked man. A single shot could end this now. Before she could steady her breath, a sharp crack split the air, not from her weapon. A bullet smacked into the rock just inches from her head, showering her with shards of stone. A sniper, somewhere above. She ducked, scanning the ridges for the glint of glass or the telltale silhouette. Nothing but rain and darkness. The enemy had her pinned. Through the storm, the armored vehicle's engine deepened into a growl. The hooded man climbed into the passenger seat, the masked man securing the case inside. The vehicle began to turn toward a narrow canyon that led out of the valley. Alina had seconds to act. Her extraction was closing in from the north, the enemy convoy moving south. She could stay and wait for backup, or she could risk everything and follow them alone. Her decision crystallized. She activated the beacon on her vest, a silent signal to command, and broke from cover, sprinting low through the rain toward the departing vehicle. The sniper fired again, the round punching into the mud just behind her boots. She didn't slow. Every muscle screamed in protest, her lungs burning as she pushed herself harder. She was closing the distance when the armored vehicle's rear hatch slammed shut. Its taillights glowed red in the storm like the eyes of some mechanical predator. Then, with a surge of power, it roared into the canyon and vanished from sight. Alina skidded to a stop, chest heaving, rain plastering her hair to her face. Somewhere beyond that canyon lay the truth about the man, the masked soldier, and the glowing device that shouldn't exist, and she intended to find it. The canyon walls narrowed, forcing the trail into a single winding path. Alina moved carefully now, every step deliberate. The rain had eased into a mist, but the air was colder, heavier, the kind that told her she was entering enemy territory. Her boots crunched against gravel as she rounded a bend and froze. The canyon opened into a vast basin, a natural amphitheater surrounded by jagged cliffs. Down below, partially concealed beneath camouflage netting, sat a forward operating base unlike anything she'd seen. It wasn't military standard, at least not officially. The structures were modular, mismatched, clearly assembled in haste. Floodlights mounted on tall poles cut harsh cones of light through the mist, casting long shadows across the perimeter. And inside those shadows, movement. She dropped to her stomach, sliding behind a cluster of boulders for cover. Raising her binoculars, she scanned the base. There, the armored vehicle she had chased. It was parked beside a prefabricated command tent, its rear hatch open. 2 guards stood watch while the masked soldier from earlier oversaw the unloading of the black polymer case. Alina's gut tightened. The case wasn't just being stored. A group of technicians, all in dark gray uniforms with no insignia, surrounded it, attaching cables that ran to a generator humming low in the background. The faint glow from inside the case pulsed, brighter now, almost alive. Her earpiece crackled. "Voss, where the hell are you? Extraction point was 5 minutes ago." She hesitated, eyes fixed on the scene below. "I found something. This isn't just an arms smuggling op. They're powering it up. Whatever's in that case, it's not conventional." Silence on the line. Then Command's voice, lower, more urgent. "Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. We're redirecting a strike team to your position." She almost laughed, the kind of humorless chuckle that came when orders clashed with instinct. "Negative. They'll move it before you get here." Before Command could respond, movement caught her eye. The hooded man emerged from the command tent, flanked by 2 armed escorts. He carried something now, a thin metal case, much smaller than the first, but handled with the same reverence. They walked straight toward a reinforced bunker at the far side of the base. The entrance was guarded by 4 men, each armed with compact SMGs. The bunker itself was built into the canyon wall, its blast doors painted a dull, rusted red. Alina knew she had 2 choices: wait for the strike team and risk losing both cases, or infiltrate now and gamble everything. She slid her rifle onto her back and began her descent, keeping to the shadows. The mist worked in her favor, swallowing her silhouette as she moved from cover to cover. Halfway down, a patrol passed within meters of her position. She pressed flat against the rocks, holding her breath as their footsteps crunched past. Reaching the outer perimeter, she crouched low behind a supply crate. From here, she could hear the faint mechanical whine of the generator and the muffled voices of the technicians. Then, a sudden shout in a language she didn't recognize. Floodlights swept across the yard, their beams searching. The patrol had found something. Her window was closing. With one last glance toward the bunker, she broke from cover, slipping between two storage containers and into the shadow of the command tent. The air here was heavy with the smell of oil, ozone, and wet canvas. Through a narrow gap in the tent flap, she saw the glowing case again. The cables now pulsed with light, as though carrying something more than electricity. One of the technicians looked up, his face pale and eyes wide, not with fear, but awe. She didn't know what was inside, but she knew one thing. Letting it leave this canyon wasn't an option. Her fingers tightened around the hilt of the combat knife at her belt. This was going to be loud. Helena's boots touched the dirt inside the outer perimeter, and she immediately dropped to a crouch. The base was alive now. Shouts carried through the mist, boots thudding on wet gravel, floodlights sweeping wildly like the eyes of a startled animal. She moved fast, slipping between supply crates stacked 3 high, their canvas covers flapping in the wind. The air was thick with the smell of diesel, sweat, and damp metal. Somewhere behind her, a guard barked an order, followed by the metallic snap of a rifle bolt. Every instinct told her to disappear, but she had already crossed the line where retreat was an option. This was deep infiltration, the point where you either finish the mission or never leave. The command tent loomed ahead, its fabric walls glowing faintly from the light inside. She slipped around the back, crouched low, and carefully lifted the flap just enough to see. Inside, the black polymer case still pulsed with that unnatural glow. The technicians were working frantically now, connecting new cables that ran to a control console. On the display, streams of data scrolled too fast to read. Numbers, symbols, heat signatures. The masked soldier stood over them like a sentinel, arms crossed, eyes hidden behind mirrored lenses. Helena's gaze shifted toward the far side of the yard, the bunker. The hooded man had just reached it, handing the smaller metal case to one of the guards. The heavy blast doors groaned open, releasing a gust of warm air into the cold night. She knew that whatever was inside that bunker was the endgame. The glowing case might be dangerous, but the smaller one was personal. She took a slow breath and began moving. A guard rounded the corner ahead of her. She closed the distance in 3 silent strides, clamping a hand over his mouth as her knife slid between the plates of his body armor. She lowered him gently to the ground and dragged the body into the shadows. Her earpiece crackled again. "Voss, strike team inbound. ETA 8 minutes. 8 minutes was an eternity in a place like this. She hugged the wall of the storage hangar, moving closer to the bunker. The guards were distracted now, one of them scanning the yard with a flashlight. The others focused on the hooded man as he disappeared inside. Helena crouched behind a generator, its low hum masking her movement. She reached into her pack and pulled out a small cylindrical device, a flash charge. She had 1 shot. With a flick of her wrist, the charge sailed across the yard and landed just beyond the bunker entrance. A blinding burst of white light erupted, followed by shouts and the sound of weapons clattering to the ground. Helena was already moving, sprinting through the haze toward the open blast doors. She slipped inside before they could close, plunging into the dim, narrow corridor beyond. The walls here were thick concrete, sweating with condensation. Red emergency lights pulsed along the ceiling, casting long shadows that shifted with every step she took. Somewhere deeper in the bunker, she heard the echo of voices, low, urgent, and speaking in that same unrecognizable language. Her rifle came up, her finger brushing the trigger guard. Every muscle in her body was coiled, ready. The corridor opened into a large chamber lined with metal crates and computer terminals. In the center, on a raised platform, sat the smaller metal case, now open. Inside, cushioned by foam, lay a device no larger than a shoebox. It was made of brushed steel, covered in strange geometric patterns that seemed to shift when the light hit them. A faint hum resonated from within, deep and almost organic. The hooded man stood beside it, one hand resting gently on the edge as though introducing it to the room. Alina stepped forward, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Step away from the case." The man turned, and for the first time, she saw his face. Pale, lined, with eyes like frozen glass. He didn't speak. He just smiled. The hooded man didn't flinch. His eyes, cold and unreadable, stayed locked on Alina as if she were nothing more than an unexpected variable, a line of code that could still be erased. He spoke finally, his voice low, but carrying through the chamber. "You shouldn't be here." Alina kept her rifle steady. "Put your hands where I can see them." He didn't. Instead, he turned his gaze back to the device, brushing his fingertips lightly over the etched patterns on its surface. The lines seemed to ripple under his touch, glowing faintly, almost like they recognized him. A low hum filled the room, growing deeper, resonating in Alina's chest. It wasn't mechanical. It felt alive. She stepped forward, boots echoing against the concrete floor. "What is that?" The man smiled without looking up. "A key." Her mind raced. A key to what? The glow intensified, the shifting patterns now aligning into a perfect spiral. The hum deepened into a rhythmic pulse, each beat synchronizing with Alina's own heartbeat until she could feel it in her teeth. Through her earpiece, static crackled. Then a voice cut through, urgent. "Voss, Intel just confirmed. That device is not in any known database. It's pre-human. You need to secure it now. Pre-human." The word chilled her more than the cold air in the bunker. The man looked up, eyes gleaming. "You think you're here to stop me, but you're late. This is already in motion." Without warning, he slammed his hand onto the device. The hum turned into a sharp, piercing tone. All around the room, the terminals flickered, streams of alien symbols racing across their screens. Somewhere deep below, a heavy mechanism began to move, the sound of massive gears grinding to life. Alina advanced quickly, closing the distance in 3 steps. She swung the butt of her rifle toward his jaw, but he caught it mid-swing with inhuman speed, shoving her back hard enough to slam her into a stack of crates. Her breath left her in a painful rush. She rolled aside just as the man reached for the device again. Her hand found the sidearm at her thigh, and she fired. 2 rounds center mass. He staggered, but didn't fall. The rounds had punched through his coat, but no blood bloomed. Instead, there was a metallic glint where the bullet struck, as if beneath the skin something else existed. He grinned. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Her pulse pounded. She had seconds, maybe less, before whatever he'd activated completed its cycle. Alina dropped her sidearm back into its holster and lunged for the device. The man moved to block her, but she kicked the side of the platform, sending the case sliding toward the edge. It hit the floor with a metallic clang. The hum faltered. For a fraction of a second, the patterns on its surface froze, and Alina seized the moment. She yanked a compact containment unit from her pack, slamming it over the device. Magnetic locks engaged with a satisfying click, muffling the sound and cutting the glow. The man roared, not in pain, but in fury. He charged, but Alina was already in motion, ducking under his arm and driving her elbow into his ribs. The impact staggered him just enough for her to bolt toward the corridor. Her earpiece crackled again. "Voss, extraction team is 2 minutes out. Get topside now." She sprinted through the narrow hallway, the weight of the containment unit heavy against her side. Behind her, the pounding of boots echoed, faster than human, relentless. The blast doors loomed ahead, still half open from her earlier breach. She dove through, hitting the gravel hard before scrambling to her feet. Floodlights swung toward her as the strike team breached the outer perimeter. The air filled with the staccato rhythm of automatic fire. Alina didn't look back. She knew the hooded man was still inside, and she knew this wasn't over. The cold night air hit Alina like a wave as she burst out of the bunker. Her boots tore into the gravel, lungs burning, the containment unit thumping against her side with every step. Behind her, the roar of the hooded man echoed through the chamber, a sound too deep to be entirely human. "Move! Move!" shouted one of the strike team operatives, waving her toward an armored vehicle parked just beyond the outer fence. Floodlights swept across the compound, slicing through the darkness. The rhythmic staccato of automatic fire filled the air as the team engaged the incoming threat. The muzzle flashes lit the night like a storm. Alina's heart hammered. She didn't need to turn around to know he was coming. A blur of motion flickered in the corner of her vision. Then the chain-link fence behind her rattled violently as the hooded man vaulted over it with inhuman agility, landing in a crouch. His eyes locked on hers, glowing faintly in the light. "Cover her!" barked the team leader. Her rounds tore through the air, but he moved like liquid shadow, weaving between bursts of gunfire. Bullets sparked against something hard beneath his clothes, ricocheting harmlessly away. Alina darted behind a shipping container, chest heaving, trying to calculate her next move. She could make a run for the vehicle, but he'd close the gap before she took 10 steps. Her earpiece crackled. "Voss, if you can't shake him, draw him towards Sector 3. We have a surprise waiting." She didn't ask what the surprise was. Instead, she bolted left, deeper into the maze of containers. The hooded man followed without hesitation, his footfalls unnervingly silent despite his speed. The metallic clang of her boots on steel-grated platforms echoed through the night. She vaulted over a low barricade, slid under a partially open loading gate, and emerged into Sector 3, a narrow, walled-off section with only one entrance. Perfect. She slowed just enough to make it seem like she'd lost momentum. The hooded man emerged from the shadows, stepping through the entrance. That's when the lights snapped on. From the rooftops, 2 operatives dropped heavy netting laced with high-voltage filaments. It hit him squarely, electricity crackling along its length. The air filled with the sharp smell of ozone as the current surged. For the first time, he faltered, muscles locking, a snarl tearing from his throat. But even through the current, he pushed against the net, strength unnatural. Alina didn't waste the opportunity. She sprinted forward, swung her rifle butt into his jaw, and drove him backward until he crashed into the container wall. "Now!" she shouted. A third operative stepped forward with a pulse cannon the size of a small generator. The weapon discharged with a deep, concussive thump. The blast sent the hooded man sprawling, the net glowing white-hot before finally going still. For a moment, the only sounds were Alina's ragged breathing and the distant hum of the containment unit. The team leader approached, eyes scanning the unmoving figure. "That going to hold him?" Alina shook her head. "Not for long." They moved fast, hauling the restrained figure onto a reinforced transport platform. The containment unit was secured inside an armored case and locked into the vehicle's core compartment. As the doors slammed shut, Alina cast one last look at the hooded man. Even unconscious, his expression was one of quiet defiance, like he knew this was only a pause in the game. The convoy roared to life, tires crunching against the gravel as they sped into the night. Somewhere behind them, deep in the bunker, the heavy gears Alina had heard earlier continued to turn, unnoticed. Whatever had started was far from over. The convoy sliced through the night, engines humming in perfect rhythm, the steady thump of armored tires on the cracked highway, filling the silence. Inside the lead vehicle, Alina sat with her rifle resting across her knees, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the windshield. The containment unit sat locked in the reinforced compartment behind her, humming softly, almost like it was alive. The driver, a broad-shouldered sergeant with a face carved from stone, glanced at her. "We're 10 minutes from Safe Zone Bravo. Hold it together." Alina gave a tight nod but didn't relax. Something about the night felt wrong. Too still. Through the comms, the rear escort reported in. "Sector clear, no contacts." A second later, the hum of the road changed. The lead vehicle's headlights cut across a patch of the highway that would... gone. "Brake!" Alina shouted. Too late. The front tires hit the void. A section of the road blasted away into a jagged crater. The vehicle lurched forward violently. Metal screamed as the suspension snapped. Before they could recover, the surrounding hills lit up with muzzle flashes. Bullets tore into the convoy, sparks dancing across armored plating. "Ambush! Suppressive fire! Now!" barked the team leader over comms. The rear vehicle swerved, its mounted gun roaring to life, cutting arcs of tracer rounds into the dark hillside. Alina kicked open the side door and slid out, boots hitting the dirt. She dropped behind a concrete barrier, scanning for the shooters. Figures moved along the ridge, fast, disciplined, wearing matte black armor that drank in the moonlight. Whoever they weren't amateurs. A flash of movement drew her eye, a glint of metal in the hands of a sniper perched higher than the rest. She adjusted her rifle, breath slowing, blocking out the chaos. One shot. The sniper crumpled, sliding down the slope. But the victory was short-lived. A thunderous boom shook the ground as an RPG streaked toward the disabled lead vehicle. It struck just above the engine, the blast sending shards of steel into the night. "Containment integrity compromised," someone shouted from inside. Her stomach knotted. If they breached that unit here, everything they'd done would be for nothing. "Cover me!" she yelled, vaulting over the barrier. Bullets snapped past her head as she sprinted toward the damaged vehicle. The air reeked of burnt fuel and scorched metal. Smoke curled from the shattered hood. Two of the black-armored attackers had reached the vehicle's side, prying at the reinforced compartment. Alina didn't hesitate. 3 shots. 2 dropped instantly. The third ricocheted off a steel plate and forced the last one back. She wrenched the compartment door closed and slammed the locking mechanism into place. The unit's hum steadied, its glow faintly visible through the armor's seams. Her comms crackled again. "We've got enemy reinforcements inbound. Fast movers, ETA 90 seconds. They didn't have 90 seconds. The team leader's voice cut through the channel. "Fall back to Rally Point Echo. Now!" Alina covered the retreat, her rifle barking in short, precise bursts. The surviving operatives dragged the wounded and hustled toward the rear vehicle, which had managed to reverse into a defensible position. As the last of them piled in, the vehicle roared away, leaving the ambush site behind. Through the small rear viewport, Alina saw the ridge ignite with more muzzle flashes, but they were already out of range. Her hands shook slightly as she reloaded, the reality settling in. Whoever had set that ambush knew exactly where they'd be and exactly what they were carrying. The hooded man might be in custody, but they clearly weren't the only ones who wanted what was inside that containment unit. And now they were being hunted. The desert wind howled as the convoy tore through the final stretch toward Rally Point Echo. The night sky was a sheet of black velvet, torn only by the streaking lights of distant tracer fire. Inside the rear vehicle, the team was silent, not the calm kind, but the heavy breathing kind, the kind that comes after you've stared death in the face and realized it isn't done with you yet. Alina sat by the containment unit, one hand gripping the edge of the reinforced casing. The hum was weaker now, faint and uneven. "What's wrong with it?" the medic asked, glancing up from tending to a wounded soldier. Not sure, she replied, her voice low. But it's not supposed to sound like this. The driver's voice cut in over comms. 2 minutes out. Perimeter forces are standing by. 2 minutes. After everything, they might actually make it. Or so she thought. The radio crackled, then screamed static. Every comm channel went dead at once. The driver swore under his breath. We're being jammed! Through the rear view port, Alina caught sight of something moving in the darkness. Shadows on the dunes, keeping perfect pace with them. Sleek mat shapes low to the ground. Vehicles, fast ones. Contact, rear quarter! She shouted, swinging her rifle up. Before anyone could react, the pursuing vehicles opened fire. The air filled with streaks of glowing rounds, the impact hammering the armor like a drum. The driver slammed the brakes, veering hard to throw off their aim. The convoy skidded sideways, dust billowing. Move! Get that unit to cover, the team leader barked. They spilled out into the night, diving behind whatever cover the dunes provided. Alina and 2 others hauled the containment unit between them, sand spilling into their boots with every step. The attackers closed in, their vehicles forming a loose circle. Figures emerged, the same black-armored operatives from the ridge, but now moving with surgical precision. And at their center, a man in a sand-colored cloak, his face hidden. He walked slowly toward them, as if the gunfire meant nothing. You've carried this far enough, his voice carried across the wind, calm yet cutting. Hand it over, and no one else has to die tonight. Alina's pulse hammered in her ears. And if we refuse? The man tilted his head. Then I take it anyway. The team leader whispered over his shoulder, We can't hold this position. We're outnumbered. Alina's eyes darted to the containment unit, then back to the cloaked man. Something about the way he spoke, the certainty in his stance. He wasn't here to negotiate. She took a slow breath. Then you'll have to try. The next moments were chaos. Gunfire erupted from both sides, the night exploding in flashes of light and plumes of sand. The containment unit's hum grew louder, higher pitched, until it was almost unbearable. A sudden flash engulfed the battlefield, white, blinding, and silent. When Alina's vision cleared, the attackers were gone. No bodies, no vehicles, just wind and sand. The containment unit lay at her feet, still humming, but now different, lower, almost like a heartbeat. She looked at the others, wide-eyed, silent, unsure if they'd just won or lost. The team leader broke the silence. What the hell just happened? Alina didn't answer. She couldn't. She didn't know. But deep down she realized something. Whatever was inside that unit had just chosen a side, and she wasn't sure it was theirs. What do you think was inside the containment unit? And why do you think it spared them? Share your theory in the comments. The next mission might just depend on it.